everybody, Mike McWilliams, upstairs to the right music. Today I'd like to talk about the Made in Japan stamp and the Crafted in Japan stamp and the difference there. It's not really a difference of quality actually, it's really an issue of production. Now there's a lot of information out there on the internet about Made in Japan guitars and Crafted in Japan guitars, and a lot of that information is not quite exactly true. So today I thought I would sort out 5 facts about Made in Japan and Crafted in Japan that you may not know. I think I'd like to share that with you today. Why don't you buckle in and take a listen. Now, Made in Japan guitars were made in the Fujigen factory. This was up until around 1996. And at that time, Fender was contracting with Fujigen to produce all of their guitars. Now, there may or may not have been a clause in the contract with Fujigen that said that guitars that were produced at the Fujigen factory were the only guitars that could be stamped Made in Japan. The reason behind this, of course, is because they had been producing previously Tokai guitars. These were the guitars that got the interest of Fender in the first place and why they made the contract. Now, after 1996, they had to go to other producers in the OEM market, and so the contract moved over to the Dynagaki, it just so happened. And at that moment, the guitars began to get stamped Crafted in Japan. But it's not quite that clear. Now, it may be interesting to note that some buyers find that the Made in Japan guitars are superior to the Crafted in Japan guitars, Fujigen being better construction overall than the Dynagaki guitars. And the truth of the matter is that you can find a great guitar on either one. It doesn't really matter. So that's the first myth I'd like to dispel, that there really is a difference. Sometimes the Fujigen guitars were better than the Dynagaki, sometimes the other way around. Again, production place is the real issue here. Some of those guitars share the same parts, so you really can't say that. So just a point I'd like to bring up. Second, there was an overlap. Fujigen didn't just stop cold. As a matter of fact, I have a guitar on its way that is made in the early part of 1995 that has a CO stamp on it, C0 stamp on it, serial number starting with. And this was after the JV series, but between the E series. So there was an overproduction there of the JV series even going into 1985. Just to bring that point out, that there wasn't consistency going on with the production of these guitars. You have to keep that in mind. Some of them ended up in catalogs, some of them didn't. Some of them were just OEMs that were directly ordered from some of the major retailers like Ishibashi, and they were sold probably in their catalogs, but this was again the domestic market. So it's a little tricky. And yes, I should mention that 1985 was a weird year. Fender had shut down their production. They were moving to a new factory. So between the fall of 1984 to around the fall of 1985, the only guitars by Fender that were being produced in the world were being made at the Fujigen factory in Japan. An interesting note. Just a part of the weird history of these Made in Japan guitars you should know. Now the third point is that the label doesn't really tell you everything. Fujigen, of course, made most of the Made in Japans. Dynagaki made most of the Crafted in Japans. But Tokai also produced Fender guitars as well, and the labels are all over the place. Some models were split between factories. And there was also a case where some Fujigen guitars were labeled Crafted in Japan just for export purposes. So again, it gets a little tricky, and I think that's why you should be very careful about choosing it over the MIJ or the CIJ alone. You really should look at the production values that went into, and by the way, you can't go wrong really either way. Now, market perceptions is the fourth point I'd like to make. Made in Japan guitars go for a lot of money, and therefore, especially with the JV series being, you know, the well-known ones from the early 1983 to, 83 to 84, 85 period, like the one I have coming in. But they go for a lot of money. Crafted in Japan guitars from around 96 or so, there is a little bit of crossover there, aren't going for as much money. And it's weird, again, as I pointed out in the previous points, some of them, they Made in Japan and the Crafted in Japan shared the same parts. So it's a false kind of perception out there going on with the differences in the market. The perception is the king. So the Made in Japans are a little bit more, but they're essentially really the same guitar in a lot of ways. Finally, there are, again, I'd like to point out and make this fifth point really strong to you, that there are Made in Japan and Crafted in Japan guitars that shouldn't exist on paper. And you should also be aware, again, there was a lot of stuff going on. It was a booming time in Japan in the 1990s. I was there. And really, there was a very hard drive to produce as many guitars as possible in that market. It was a booming guitar market. So there's a lot of inconsistencies there that you should be aware of. Some were dealer exclusives and others were custom orders. So again, when you're looking at the used market in the Japan section of whatever it is you're looking at on the internet, be aware that there are those inconsistencies there. And just because something doesn't show up on the forums as a recognized model doesn't mean that it's not. So there's 5 points here. First point is the label isn't everything. Production overlapped. Factory really does equate to the label, so Fujigaki is made in Japan and Dynagaki is crafted in Japan. Rarity, although I have one coming, doesn't always mean better. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You really have to look into the history and take a deep dive. It's worth your time to take a look at it anyway, if you're interested in this topic. And you can see where you can find some rare ones that are really super nice, but that's not always the case. And because of that, some guitars are exception to the rule. Again, there are a lot of custom models. There was a Japan Fender custom shop in the 1990s. It only lasted for 2 years, but there are a lot of guitars that came out of that as well that you can find still in the secondhand market. So that's it for today. I wanted to bring up these 5 facts about made in Japan and crafted in Japan guitars that you may not be aware of. I think that for anybody out there who's in the market to buy one of these, this is food for thought, something to consider, and I am so pleased to be able to bring it to you. If you like today's show, please take the time to hit the like button. That really helps. And go a step further and join this ever-growing community and hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you join it. Every day it's growing. A lot of cool stuff like this all the time. Stay tuned for the next one. I think it's going to be unboxing. And for this 500th episode of Upstairs to the Right Music, I want to say thank you guys for the last 500 and for the next 500 as well. You take care and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.